Kia ora everyone, I'm Mikey and welcome to the studio. In this video, I'll be exploring the challenges of filming with a telephoto zoom lens on a full-frame camera. We'll be experimenting with building a versatile rig to film everything from 70 all the way to 600mm, and we're going to do it all with one lens. Usually the kit that I use is focused around the sort of 18 to 70mm range. This covers most of the general filming work that I do. My previous camera system was the Panasonic GH5. The Micro Four Thirds system meant lens focal lengths were doubled, so you could use smaller lenses and get bigger magnification. So when I went on a trip to a bird sanctuary island, one of my favorite places in the whole world, Mātangi, I took with me a 100 to 300mm Panasonic zoom lens. And when used on the GH5, it was 200 to 600. And I got some really great footage that I liked a lot and made a video out of that I ended up sending to the people that look after the island, and they used it on their website as the landing video. I was super stoked with that. As time went on, I moved into the Sony full-frame system like many people did when the A7S III came out. A fantastic camera with autofocus, full frame, 4K 120, and all of the things that we need in the toolkit to do our job and make our lives easier and make the picture better. So when I found out that there was a family gathering in South Africa and safari was on the cards, I knew I had to go, and I really wanted to film it. But I was going to need some serious telephoto action. I'd hired a Sony 200 to 600 on a subsequent visit to Mātangi and shot some great bird footage that I really was impressed by. However, it's a huge lens and I was only really able to use it on a monopod or handheld, which still gave fantastic results, but I'm always looking for an excuse to experiment and find some new tech to play with. So I started on this journey of how can I build a telephoto setup and take it to film on safari. At first I was looking at 150 to 600, 200 to 600, even a 60 to 600 Sigma lens, these super zooms. And at first I thought that was the way I was going to go, but looking at the price tags on some of these lenses and how much I'm really going to use the lens, what if I only use it this one time in Africa? It's quite a lot of money to spend on a telephoto lens that might not get used in the general kit. In researching these lenses, I also researched some lenses that weren't really super telephoto wildlife lenses, and one that kept popping up was the newer edition of the Sony 70-200 GM 2.8, which is a classic focal length for photography. I have used one of those, the Canon one, in the past on old systems, and it was a good little lens if you needed to punch in a really great image. But this new Sony kept coming up as being light and faster focus and super sharp. The price tag was just sort of beyond what I was willing to spend until I came across one secondhand. Another part of this was using telephoto lenses with the Sony A7S III. You can use the teleconverter system. Now, I've never used teleconverters before. A lot of stills photographers, wildlife photographers saying they make your image more blurry. Some of them saying you got to use them to get that extra reach. But one tiny snippet from a Gerald Undone video where he said,
but keep in mind, this is also a 50 megapixel still image comparison. In 4K video, I could barely tell the difference.
Is this lens sharp enough to shoot with a 2x teleconverter, making it a 140 to 400? So I went down to the shop and I set up a really budget little test, just a sharpness test, and rolled a few clips and brought them back to the studio and had a look. And pretty much, I mean, it's not as sharp and there's a little more noise. It might just be an exposure thing, but I'm a post-production guy. I don't mind doing a little denoising and a little sharpening just to get things looking good. I was confident again that, yeah, this lens plus the 2x teleconverter is going to give me what I need. Another test I did, it just occurred to me in the shop. I'd heard about Sony's clear image zoom, which is a sort of digital internal zooming, which can give you up to 1.5 times. And so I just ran some tests as I was doing it, and when I got the files back and I looked at them in Catalyst, it said that I was shooting at 600mm. When you do the 2x teleconverter, you take 200 to 400 and then times that by 1.5 and you get 600. Do you? Yeah, 600mm. So suddenly I've got one lens It's small, it's light, and I can achieve 600mm with acceptable quality. Now there are some downsides. When you use clear image zoom, you lose some of the functionality. You can't do focus tracking. That might be a deal breaker, but when I zoom from 400 to 600, it's not as big as you'd think. It's a lot bigger at the wider end. Every millimeter makes a difference, whereas at the longer end, I feel like, I don't know if this is mathematically correct, but it seems like it's diminishing returns or exponentially changing. I don't know how that works. I have to look that up. Another advantage of shooting on the 70-200 was that I'd be able to use it on a gimbal. It was light enough with my camera gear that I'll have a whole nother dimension of filming. And so I'm starting to think 70-200 plus the teleconverter on the gimbal. Now we're talking full movement, parallax. It's going to give real flexibility in filming, especially long focal lengths. I bought the 70-200 secondhand. Just as I got the lens, I got a phone call saying, hey, can you come and be a B camera operator on an advert, a campaign ad for a local political party? And I thought a 70-200 here is going to be a really great lens because it's going to be a public gathering. There are going to be a lot of people. I don't want to be up in people's faces. There are going to be speeches. There's going to be a lot of reach involved. And I thought, now's the time to try it. Upon researching the 70-200, I wanted to make sure it would fit on my gimbal. And I found a great video verifying that yes, it did balance well on a DJI RS3. However, when I went to set up the new lens on the gimbal, I discovered that I'd made a small error. The gimbal used to mount the camera was in fact the RS3 Pro, which has a longer arm and handles more weight. As I'd already committed to filming the very next day on this ad, I decided I needed to go out and buy an RS3 Pro and make sure everything worked. Part of my plan with this setup was to use the focus motor from DJI, but apply it to the zoom ring on the lens. This way I'd have fast control of the zoom on the gimbal itself without having to use my other hand on the lens. The camera and lens balanced well on the gimbal, and I took it out that evening for a quick test at the local dog park. There are a lot of challenges to overcome with this setup, namely dialing in the joystick and turn speed on the gimbal. And I'm glad I did do these tests as it helped a lot with confidence going into the next day's shoot. The ad shoot went as well as I could hope for. The gimbal and lens performed excellently given the short notice and amount of time I'd spent on the tools. The DOP on the job was filming pieces to camera on an ARRI Alexa, an older model that was shooting 3.2K on a big Panavision Cine lens. He was not all that happy that I'd be shooting B-cam on a Sony a7S III. He was concerned that the image quality difference could be an issue. As I was also the editor on this particular job, when I returned to the studio after the shoot, I was surprised to see that the ARRI setup was very soft and noisy compared to the Sony. Keeping in mind that this is a 1080p timeline and that the a7S III has some internal noise reduction, I was still very impressed with the results, and it only improved my confidence in this camera body and the lens. After all, the new film The Creator was shot on an FX3, which is just an a7S III in a cine form factor. I'd verified that the 70-200 on the gimbal was working well. Now I needed to explore the reality of filming at even longer focal lengths. With the teleconverter attached, I went out to do some testing, shooting from 240 to 600mm. The first thing that jumped out was, this is a difficult style of shooting. There's a reason these focal length shots are often on a tripod. Every tiny movement you make results in magnified movement of the frame. So I dialed the joystick and gimbal turn speeds all the way down to about 8%. Looking for intense wildlife scenarios, I went down to a local regional park where they keep a bunch of farm animals. At first I didn't think this would be very interesting footage, but it turned out to be a great practical test of the brig. I started to understand how to move at these longer focal lengths and practice some techniques for using the gimbal, making use of the joysticks as primary controls. I find the image to be great. The detail is crisp even at 600mm. The colors are vibrant and the fall off to out of focus areas is smooth. Even though I managed to get both second hand, the cost of the lens and the teleconverter was considerable. This and upgrading the gimbal meant a fair amount of money spent on the rig. However, I've essentially added a best-in-class 70-200mm 2.8 to the everyday kit and a 240 to 600mm for wildlife filmmaking, all with one lens and a handy little teleconverter. So I've really enjoyed this experiment working with this gear, and I'm really interested to see what else can be done with it, I'm really pumped up to take it to Africa and shoot some wildlife, to film some wildlife. And yeah, I'll be documenting that whole process too, so looking forward to sharing that all with you. Until next time, we'll see you soon. Cheers. Bye.